So the biggest issue right now that I see with politics in the United States is it's straight out of the fascist playbook. It's the Gish gavel. It's where Republicans are flooding uh, flooding the media with scandal in order to cover up the whole of their scandals. Let's break it down. Let's talk about just a few things that need to be dealt with, because you don't need to memorize everything about these punks. All you need to do is know enough about them to know when you must vote against them. That's it. On the left, it's worth splitting hairs. On the left right now, it is worth having detailed discussions about policy and blah, 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 blah. The reason being there's a choice to be made, but there's no choice after you've decided there's no way in hell I'm voting Republican. So your goal as somebody who wants America to remain a democracy, to be a safe place to exist, your goal should be to learn a couple of things about Republicans so that you can make a very strong case. Let's start with corruption on the Supreme Court. Conservatives in the United States right now are bribing Supreme Court justices, and they're doing that so that they can get opinions that go against logic, that go against the spirit of the law. Let's listen to Thom Hartmann talking a little bit about why that is, why suddenly this crop of Supreme Court justices are absolute yes men for the people who are in charge.
Court. Back in the day, in Federalist number 78, Alexander Hamilton wrote at some length. The Federalist Papers were a series of newspaper articles that were published mostly in the summer and fall of 1787 and through 1788. In the fall and winter of 1787 and throughout 1788, that were basically sales pitches to the states to ratify the Constitution, which happened in 1789, and that's when we officially became the modern United States of America.
So real quick, this is why I adore Thom Hartmann, right? I mean, obviously, he's got great takes as well. But he does the same thing Maddow does. He acknowledges the fact that not all of us have a degree in American history, and not all of us spend all day working on this stuff. And even if we do, sometimes we're a little dumb. So it's helpful to get an explanation like this. So yes, he's talking about the Federalist Papers and what that means for the intent of the Supreme Court, as in why we have the structure we do have with the Supreme Court.
George Washington got elected, and the Supreme Court was created, and all that kind of by Congress, and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting, by the way, the Supreme Court did not exist at the creation of our country. The Constitution does not create a Supreme Court. Article 3 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to create the Supreme Court, which they did, which I find fascinating. In any case, Alexander Hamilton argued strongly, and it's in the Constitution, I mean, he argued successfully as well, that Supreme Court justices should be on the court for life. He calls it permanency in office. And he said the reason why, well, he said nothing can contribute so much to the court's firmness and independence as permanency in office. This quality may therefore be justly regarded as an indispensable ingredient in its constitution, and in a great measure as the citadel of the public justice and the public security. He goes on to say, if then the courts of justice are to be considered as the bulwarks of a limited constitution against legislative encroachments, this consideration will afford a strong argument for the permanent tenure of judicial offices, since nothing will contribute so much as this to that independent spirit in the judges, which must be essential to the faithful performance of so arduous a duty. The whole point, in other words, was if we give judges lifetime tenure, so they no longer have to rely on a political party, they no longer have to rely on political donors, they no longer have to rely on the support of partisan newspapers, then they will do what they believe is right, rather than what, helps their friends or helps them or helps their political party.
All right. So, the idea behind the Supreme Court, he's saying they have lifetime appointments so that they are not pleading with somebody, some faction, to keep them in power. However, the problem arises when they are being influenced in other ways. And he's, should we skip it? No. I'm gonna skip ahead just a little bit. So he discusses then all kinds of conservative judges, like politically conservative judges, who then went on to interpret the law in favor of leftist causes. And the link is in the description if you want to check out the whole clip. Look, any view that goes to a left channel is going to have compounding positive effects. Check it out, by all means. Check out Thom Hartmann's whole segment. But I'm going to skip over that because then he goes into, you can just take it as given. There were plenty of conservative, or rather judges appointed by conservatives who went on to give sane legal decisions. Such as the dissenting opinion in Citizens United. But then he goes on to this part that I want to play for you. Why then are our current justices giving these wild and, frankly, let's just call it like it is, wrong interpretations of the law in our country, of the structure of the law in our country?
Then Jerry Ford nominates John Paul Stevens in 1975. John Paul Stevens, famously dissented to Citizens United, famously dissented to Bush v. Gore. Again, became, and in fact, he wrote the Chevron versus NRDC case, which is where the Chevron deference came out of, which I talked about last week. This is the doctrine that the Supreme Court created that said that, if a regulatory agency hires scientists and comes up with something and says this is how it should be, then that's how it should be. The court should defer to them. Thus, the
Crazy,
deference. Right? So yeah, John Paul Stevens, and then of course, finally George Herbert Walker Bush put David Souter on the bench, and David Souter, who John Sununu, the Republican governor of New Hampshire, which is where Souter was from, said it'll be a home run for conservatives. And what did Souter do? Well, he voted in Planned Parenthood versus Casey in favor of abortion rights for women.
So then what happened?
He joined John Paul Stevens in opposing the court's handing the 2000 election to George W. Bush, even though he lost the election by 500,000 votes.
I do want to say real quick, that Republican projection is part of that. You just know that Republicans saw that and said to themselves, well, Democrats must be stealing elections. After all, we steal elections. That must be how you get elected. It couldn't possibly be that we are a despised group of villains. Oy. But, Tom, tell us then, why now? Why do we have this corruption now?
So what happened was after these four guys got on the court, the billionaire class, the right-wing billionaires, were like, we can't let this happen again. And they started pouring money into the Federalist Society and other groups that would make sure that judges were genuine conservatives. Now, all these guys were actually genuine conservatives at the time they were put on the bench. But more importantly, that once people get on the bench, that there would be a steady, regular, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever flow of money to them. John Roberts' wife made over $10 million. Amy Coney Barrett's husband's law firm is now booming, and he's getting rich off it.
There it is.
Sam Alito travels to Europe for luxury trips and gets huge speaking fees. And, don't get me started on Clarence Thomas. Make sure that there's a steady flow of money and gifts to these guys to keep them conservative. And this has corrupted the court. And the corrupted court is now corrupting American democracy. So we've got to do something about this. I think the things we have to do are fairly straightforward. We need to, number one, we need to expand the court. Number two, we need to make exceptions to what the court can rule on to basically reverse Citizens United and say corporations aren't people. We need to do something about the shadow docket. I mean, there's a bunch of things that can be done. But, as Adam Schiff said, our nation's highest court is not a conservative court because a conservative court would have respect for precedent, and this court doesn't. This is a radical, reactionary court. And Congress needs to do something about it. Obviously, it's not going to happen this year, but we need to get ready for after the next election.
And Thom Hartmann ends it with what I think is the most important takeaway. We need to win in 2024. People that give a damn about principles, about things actually functioning in a fair and decent way. People who aren't just using the law as an excuse to attack groups they don't like. We need to win in 2024. And when we win, we need to do so with a plan. 1 second, I apologize for the sound. There we go. We need to do so with a plan. The win in 2020 was a partial victory. America realized that Trump was what he looked like and responded appropriately. They put somebody else in office. But we didn't follow through. We had 2 years where we could have had incredible change with the right pressure put on to Democrats. But this awakening that we had in regards to Republicans, we had too late in regards to Democrats. It's not enough to elect the right people. Now we see. You have to elect the right people and then use them. MAGA has done a fantastic job with this. They understand how this works now. And the way they came to understand it is that groups funded by right-wing billionaires and some of the more extreme church organizations in the country, they organized people. We need to take it upon ourselves to do that organizing. We need to win in 2024, and we need to make it clear to our elected officials what they have been elected to do. That means in 2023, hey, start in the summer, baby. We need to go to the people that are going to be running and talk about these things. Now, you'll have an easy job of it if you've got a Democrat in your area who is running for re-election. You'll know who to talk to. Say, if you want my vote, you should know I am voting for somebody who is going to put restrictions on the Supreme Court to make it illegal for them to take bribes. You need to be very clear with your candidate what they need to do to please you. In addition, people that are going to be running, you should encourage them to run on a platform of court reform. Because until we get that, we are going to be at the mercy of people who take bribes. So whoever's doing the bribing will be our masters. Pay attention to who's running in your area. Be in contact with them. Save their email. Save their phone number. And remember that They are not there merely for a general gist of what you want. They are there to do specifically what you want. So tell them, so they know. Let's see what the wicked community has to say.